All right, so we are now joined on the line to chat about this great initiative, this day that we are all celebrating, talking about people's sexual orientation and gender identity. We're talking to Dr. Nontando Hadebe. Dr. Nontando, thank you so much for joining me on Weekend Dawn. Really appreciate it. My first question is, why is it important to commemorate days like these?
I think it's very important, as we know, to always bring to the public the needs of our vulnerable communities. We know how much, for example, women have benefited from Women's Day. We know how much refugees have benefited from Refugee Day, and so there is an importance of making visible those in our community that are usually invisible, and also alerting our community, educating them to be able to see that this group of people that have been discriminated against are part of our humanity, that we are all equal. And so it has an educational value as well as an awareness value, as well as an ethical value and justice value to highlight discrimination, exclusion, as well as marginalization.
Now, is there a specific theme that's being followed for this year, considering that obviously every year has a theme?
Yes, indeed. The whole addressing of the phobia, I think that's a very important thing, and particularly as faith communities, because we have contributed in our theologies, in the way in which we speak about LGBTI persons, and so that requires us to be held accountable. That requires us to reflect, because our fundamental belief is in the human dignity of all people.
Now, how do we, as people of the media, debunk these myths about the LGBTQIA+ community, and how do we help people to be more aware that these are also just normal people like anyone else?
I think, the most important thing is to get down to basics. That we are all born in the same way, that LGBTI people did not fall from the sky. And, when it comes to faith people, that every single person across all faiths is created in the image of God. And therefore, any violence, any diminishing, and it was Martin Luther who said that whenever we diminish any person, we diminish ourselves. And so our constitutions and everything that we uphold as affirming human rights needs to be translated. And so therefore we need to, and there are many myths, like for example, people will say in Africa that LGBTI people are un-African. Prior to colonialism, there were no homosexual people. But research has shown, and language in all African groups has shown, that there were names for people of a different social orientation. But then the amazing thing is that there was no phobia, there was no prejudice. They were integrated into the communities. And so the phobia and the myths that this is un-African needs to be really tackled. And also, secondly, from a religious perspective, to be able to, where all kinds of interpretations of sacred texts are used to diminish and to condemn LGBTI persons, those texts needs to be reread in the framework of the fact that every person is made in the image of God, and that our fundamental faith upholds the preciousness of all life, the value of all life. And so when we read our text within that framework of dignity, human dignity, that framework of the preciousness of life and the value of all people, then we will be able to, address the myth that homosexual people are despised or they are rejected by our God. And I think those myths need to be addressed. And there's a lot of ignorance that comes with prejudice, but I think we need to address those fundamentals.
Let's talk about what's currently going on now, this COVID-19 pandemic. Coronavirus is on each and every human being's lips. What would your advice be for people out there who are dealing with a lot of issues by being locked down at home, but are maybe unable to come out, or maybe they're still exploring their sexuality and they're being discriminated against within their homes?
Yeah, indeed, this has happened even prior to COVID-19, that the two places, according to the other foundation who did research on the status of LGBTI in 10 African countries, found that the two places where LGBTI persons face the most discrimination is the religious space as well as the home. And I think that is the most, and those are spaces that are meant to be nourishing. Those are spaces that are meant to be life-giving. And the home in particular is a very, very difficult space. And now I think with the social, distancing as well as the lockdown where people are now in their homes together, and are having difficult conversation, and we've seen the rise of domestic violence. So at this particular moment, I think, there needs to be an exercise of wisdom to be able to build relationships, to lay the foundations, because before one can actually reveal who they are, there needs to be a relationship. So in the family, there needs to be a foundation of relationships, strong relationships being built and bonding, so that when the person comes out and says, this is who I am, there is already a foundation of love. And so I think that is the most important thing during this COVID-19, is to restore our relationships, and is to find ways in which as families and as communities we are relating beyond sexuality. We are relating as human beings, as ubuntu. And when we embrace that, when we begin to cultivate that in our families, and then I would encourage the LGBTI person to be the one who initiates the bonding of the family, and create spaces where, when they are able to say the beauty of who they are, then there is already a context of love, there's a context of acceptance, and there's a context of celebrating difference. Because you see, we are trying to celebrate difference. This is the issue. We are saying that human beings are different. We know that we are different in all other aspects. We have different races, we have different IQs, we have different interests and talents. We need to infuse in that conversation of difference that we have different sexualities, and that those are part of who we are. Because many people believe that it's a choice. People believe that people just decide and they choose. But I would like to say to my heterosexual counterparts, that we were, just as we were born heterosexual and had no choice in our sexuality, that our brothers and sisters also do not have a choice, that people are born with their sexuality, people are born with their race, people are born with their IQ and all other differences. And we need to make that a starting point, that this is a gift from God. This the differences that we have, including sexual diversity, are part of what it means to be created in the image of God.
Ma'am Nontando, we'll leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time. That's Dr. Nontando Hadebe, Catholic theologian, chatting to us about the significance of today, celebrated the world over as International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia.